Hi guys, welcome back. We're so excited that you're here. Today's episode is all about making intuitive decisions that transform your life. And this is a common question that we both get asked on how do we know if our intuition's working? How do we know if the decisions that we're about to make are the right ones for us? Right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the best question. And I feel like a lot of the times it's looking back and realizing, and that's where like the farther time goes on, the more clear it becomes.
Yeah.
But there's a process to where you could be in the moment too, to where you could sense that before time passes, right? Because for the average person, they look back and like, oh, I knew I should have made that decision. But how do we come in the present moment to where we're like, hell yes, that way, or hell no, that way?
That's the question to think about. And we were just having a conversation about clarity and how important clarity is in knowing what you want, because it's not going to seem so random when you get opportunity that comes into your space. If you know exactly what you want, it's not going to be hard to make that decision at all.
Exactly, and that's a pitfall right there, because a lot of people fall into the pitfalls where they look around and see what everybody else is doing, and they're like, oh, I want that, and I want that, and they're looking outside and they're figuring out what they want rather than looking inside.
Yes.
And I think that causes a lot of the problems.
It does. And if you can switch it around where you take that time to be by yourself, take 5 minutes every morning and start writing in a journal or take a walk, doing those types of things and getting clear on just what's coming up in your mind, if it happens to float in, and set the intention of, okay, what is the next 30 days going to look like for me, and start to list out ideas. When you do spot things in other people that go along with what you have written, or maybe there's a little added bonus with other things that you figure out that you like, it means that you're in the frequency of receiving that too, if that's something that you're clear on. And you can look at it as a gift when you see other people doing what you want to do. But the confusing part is if you go out and look, they say squirrel, squirrel, where you're so distracted looking at everyone else and you start thinking, well, that looks like they're happy. It looks like they're doing really well. I want that, but they don't know if it would actually make them happy because they haven't even tuned into that with their own soul.
Yes, and they're judging how they look on the outside compared to how they feel on the inside.
Yes.
And it's not a like versus like comparison.
Right. And I just listened to an interview, and I can't even tell you who it was. But it was Kelly Clarkson, actually. It was on her talk show. I saw it pop up. And she said, she was talking to Jessica Simpson. I'm almost positive Jessica Simpson. And they were having this conversation about how everyone thought at the worst time in their life, they were the most happiest. Like they looked great. They were in shape. They looked like they were happy on the outside. But she's like, that picture right there shows the worst time of my life. So that's just one example that, you look at something and you think, oh, they look happy. I want that too. But if you don't tune in first and figure out what makes you happy, you will literally be going into a tunnel of confusion, and you'll be comparing yourself and think, why am I not here yet? And why can't I have this and that?
Exactly. And then how do you know the difference? How do you know if you're following your internal guidance system or if you're following what we were just talking about? I think it's all about if you're in flow or not, right? Like, you're not going to stay in flow all of the time, but you're going to be in flow most of the time when you're following your internal guidance system.
Right.
When you're following that other stuff, most of the time you're going to be out of flow, and you're going to have a lot of anxiety and resistance and all of these different things that come in to stop you and feel like they're stopping you from going forward. Yeah, you get that when you're following your internal goals and dreams, but it's different. It's a balancing act. You feel like you're being weighted down whenever you're not following your own unique soul.
Yes, and what happens with that is you start to focus so much on your problems and the negativity that's coming at you, because you have nothing else to focus on. You had no clear intention in the first place. You had no clue what you were going to do. You didn't even have a vision. So all of a sudden, when something active comes at you, whether it's negativity or not, you're riding on emotions. You're up here and then you're down here. And it's like you're dodging things. Like, you're excited about your life, then you hate your life. And I can say this very, very clearly because it's happened to me at some point in my life where I've felt this feeling. And it's always when I haven't had clarity on my vision. That's when it's always come up.
It always goes back to clarity. So people always ask, how do I make the best intuitive decisions? It all goes back to clarity. But then that's a whole nother thing, right? Because we mentioned different journaling and working out in the morning and nutrition and all these different things. But it's like, it's not just one thing, right? So to help someone specifically on here, it's like, we can't give them, here, do these 5 things and it's going to fix everything. And I think that a lot of time that's what people's looking for too. And I always say, run the experiment on yourself, and that's how you know.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing that you're really good at with the consistency, because it's something that over the years, I always thought that I struggled with consistency, but we have weekly meetings. If you've been listening to this podcast or you're one of our students or coaching clients, you know what we do every single week. And when we come together, we share the positives in each other that we've seen for that week in business. And when you said, you're really consistent, I'm like, I am. But when it comes to things outside of the business that go along with it, it took me a little bit to understand the importance. And it might be something connected to exercising and walking or anything like that. So you have to think about these things. Now, a lot of the problems that come up with people that have lack of clarity and lack of decisiveness is because they're doing so many different things. They're looking for every external thing to give them the answer. And I'm a psychic medium. So people call me for answers and confirmation. So I get it. But if you're going down the line of everything, it could be psychic readings and you get 10 of them from 10 different people, but you're still not sure and you don't even know what you want. You are going to be so confused, So you have to think about, like, am I doing too much in one day or too much for 1 week? It's when you actually slow down that you're going to be more clear.
Exactly. It's this constant daily reflection, cleansing your body, picturing acting like you're a dirty sponge, and then you put water through it and you squeeze it and then all the sponge is clean again. It's like we got to do that with our physical body and our emotional body on a daily basis. And if we don't, or if we do, either way, it compounds. Either way. And a lot of times we get stuck. People get stuck because decades and decades of compounding because this whole episode's about decision making, right? So we're making, I don't even know how many decisions per day, probably tens of thousands of decisions per day. And if we're not hell yes, hell no, and we're doubting every little decision that we're making, that compound effect alone is enough to create a thunderstorm of clouds in your mind to where you can't see clearly. And then we wonder why we're making these intuitive decisions we thought and they're not panning out. And that happens a lot too, to where we look back and we think that was intuitively made, but we look back and we're like, oh, that wasn't. And I think that's part of the learning process too, is reflecting and realizing the difference between those energies of what panned out and what didn't.
Yes, reflecting back on that. And that's why it's important to keep a journal, to write down, okay, I had a situation come up. I wasn't quite sure about it, but this is what I went with my intuitive nudge, and see if it panned out, to compare it. And one of the other things that comes up is, like, in the physical body and emotional, usually if I know something's right, I don't make too much time. I don't take too much time to make the decision. I'm just like, that's it, I'm in. Like, that's how I do things. Like, when I know this is what I need to do, I just do it. It's when I'm over-analyzing and second-guessing things, I'm either not in the flow to make that choice in that moment, or I'm overcomplicating things because I'm in my analytical mind.
Exactly.
So when you know that you're in flow to even make the intuitive decision, you're going to know in an instant yes or no. Like, there should not be any lagging time where you're calling 50 people to find the answer. And I know we're human, so that can happen. But I'm also thinking of a group. There's a spiritual group that I'm a part of. It's like a business spiritual group. And the common theme with the group sometimes is when someone's going through something, they're like, okay, I have a question. I want to know, all you intuitives out there, is it a yes or is it a no? And that's what they put out. They don't tell you anything really that's going on. Is it a yes or a no? And people are like, oh, I get a definite yes, or I get a definite no. That's not even clarity. Like, that's not accurate. Because
right. There's ways to use resources, other people, in a powerful way.
Yeah.
And there's ways to do it when you're in a victim or a disempowering way.
Well,
it's kind of like the difference there, right?
Yeah, definitely. No? But in this situation, it's more of like trying to get the most yeses or nos to confirm what they think it is. Yeah. But when you put an answer out there, like to ask someone and say, is it a yes or a no, before you even give them the situation or anything like that, it could easily get in the way of the human mind, where they think, they just blurt out an answer, but it's not in flow. Do you know what I'm saying? It's hard to explain. Mm-hmm. So the importance of intuitive guidance, intuitive nudges for yourself will be to know that sense of urgency where you just know in your heart that either you're going to make it happen or you're going to choose to do it.
Exactly. It's whether you're making big decisions or smaller decisions, right? Like, I think back before I moved to Tampa, and the decision when we talked on the phone, which a lot of the people listening heard that story before. If not, go back to our previous podcast episodes and you'll hear it. Yeah. But we talked on the phone and I just knew, like you were saying, hell yes, I need to be with this person. It was really weird. And I knew I needed to move to Tampa. Yeah. And it was like, I didn't know how I was going to do all of that. I was still in school. I was running a lawn care business part-time.
Logically, it wouldn't make sense.
I was going in circles. It didn't make sense. But I just trusted the hell yes. And then I did what I had to do along the way. And I feel like that was a big decision that was a ripple effect that really helped me in my decision making, to where, like you were saying, it's a hell yes or no. If I feel it's a hell yes, I'm committed, and then I just figure it out along the way. If it's not, then it's not.
And during that time, I know for me, I never asked any friends, do you think that I should have Tony come to visit me? Even though we had never met.
They'd have been
That's
like,
not
hell no, who's this guy?
Yeah, like this stranger. I said, like, listen, this is what's happening. Yeah. And it's funny because the people that I told, they knew that for 4 years, I wasn't dating anyone. And I was so in tune with my emotions at that point because I was doing so much alone on my own healing journey. Mm-hmm. So I was very psychic for myself then.
Because you were taking care of yourself. And I look back at the situation, I was taking care of myself. I was working out, I was studying, I was trying to figure out myself. I was figuring out my career, and I was asking questions. And I was doing the work that you can't do for me, that my parents can't do for me. Nobody else could do for you except for you. And I think that's going back to what you were saying, and why I was clear to follow that nudge. If I wasn't doing all of that work, then that nudge, I would have overthought that. I would have never felt it. And I think that's a big part of it, is it's a daily thing. You can't just be like, oh, I have a degree now, the work's over. It's like, well, it might work like that in college in one way, but it doesn't work like that in the real world. Like, the work continues every day. It's a continuous energy cleanse, deep reflection, and moving energy and experimenting.
Right. And there's going to be moments where, like with that situation, I never saw any doubt at all. Like, any doubt at all. But logically, looking back on who I am as a person, I would never do that normally. I'd never have some stranger, I'm calling you a stranger, but like someone that I never met come and visit.
And this Florida. Is a powerful point to why we made this episode, is because a lot of the intuitive decisions that you make, you would not do normally. Yeah. Like, if you look back on the most powerful shifting ones, if I think back, like me becoming a coach and working with psychic mediums. If you would have told me I was going to do that 10 years ago, I'd be like, yeah, maybe coaching, but working with psychic mediums, like what the hell? So it's these different decisions that are outside of the box, outside of what you even thought that you were. Because I feel like what you were saying at the beginning, a lot of us don't even know who we are. We don't even know what we truly want because we're not looking enough. We're not asking the right questions, and we're not reflecting and cleansing our energy on a daily basis. So therefore, we lost before we even started.
Yeah, so true. And one of the things that you could think of too, when I mentioned the sense of urgency before, like when you know, and you just do it, sometimes there's going to be a moment where you have like a fluttering, like a butterfly feeling, like an excitement feeling, like, oh my gosh, I'm taking this leap. Am I really doing this? That's a different feeling than feeling like your stomach is in knots. That's when I know something's not right. I shared the story before, but we went to close on a house in it was beautiful. On paper, everything was good. I was signed up for it. Like we were on board. We were signed up for this house. Something took over. Physically, my stomach just like was in knots. I'm like, I can't do it. I feel sick. I feel shaky. This isn't right. And it wasn't right. And the next house was right there. The golden ticket was right there, and it felt so different. It felt exciting. It felt right. It felt uplifting, expansive. And both houses were beautiful, but you'd think on paper the other one would be that choice, you know?
Possibly, yes.
Both of them, like to the outside world,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Definitely.
So, I mean, both of them are beautiful, but the other house
was
bigger.
It had 10-foot ceilings. It had a lot of upgrades that the second house that we got ended up having in one way, but it wasn't as big, right? So this house was bigger. It's a little bit more money, but like Lindsay was saying, the knots in your stomach, I was pretty pissed off about it because I was wanting to close it.
He's like,
and I'm emotional, and I'm like, hell yes, let's do it. But then after I took a walk and I realized, wait, no, this needs to be a hell yes on both parts, right? And if it's not, like for Lindsay, there was a lot of yeses, like she's saying. Like she's like, oh, look at this beautiful home, the location we wanted, everything. But it wasn't a hell yes inside. It was in between.
And I'm like, I'm
and
sorry.
If it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no.
It's not happening.
And it was a hell no.
Do it.
And
like,
we let it go.
Change.
And I was probably crying.
Oh yeah, he was like, this is like taking candy from a kid at a candy store. I'm like, I'm sorry.
But I knew it had to be, right? At the end,
and
I
said,
was
okay,
like,
if you're getting this, he's like, I'm emotionally attached to this.
I get this.
So I'm probably not thinking as clearly, intuitively.
And I had to apply exactly what I share with all my clients and what I believe is like what we're saying here. It's a hell yes or it's a hell no.
Right.
And we ended up, we love the house that we're in. Exactly. And it's working out perfectly.
And that's a powerful thing. Like if you have a group of people or a partner that also is on board with taking care of, you know, their energy and communicating and talking, it makes it that much stronger too. You can do this individually, obviously, intuitively, because there's some moments where I'm like, Tony, I know I need to do this. Or Tony's like, I know we need to do this. And I'm like, all right, I'm trusting it right now because I'm not in that same energy on board, but I know that I'm trusting you. Like I know you're in your power in this moment, or he'll say the same for me. So you don't need a partner to act intuitively, but it's just an added bonus sometimes. So I would pay attention to that fluttering feeling, that excitement, you know, okay, I'm going to make it work. Like, I know this is kind of scary, but I'm going to take the leap. Or that feeling of knots in your stomach, like your stomach starts to hurt. That is not a good sign. Like for me personally, I don't know if anyone else has experienced this before. So think about that. So before we kind of sign off, let's recap that the importance of really having a vision or clarity on what you actually want. There's so many people walking around life where they're like, I want this, but then they say this. And it's like everything that comes at them, it's confusing because they're confused. So you have to get very clear on what do you want? It's like the movie The Notebook. Mm-hmm. You know that part?
What do you want? Where do you want to eat?
Yeah. I know. That's what the meme is. It's like, what do you want? But that's exactly what you need to think about is, you know, intuitive signs and messages in that frequency is so beautiful, and it's constantly happening to us every single day. But if we're walking around in a cloud, just going through the motions of life, and we're not clear on what we want, we're going to be very confused at all the options that we have in front of us.
Yes. And just a tip that you can do once you leave this episode here is take a piece of paper, draw a T-chart, looks like a cross. Yeah. On one side, write positive decisions. On the other side, write negative decisions. And think of all of the intuitive positive decisions that you made throughout your life. And think of all the negative ones. And then reflect in your mind and your energy on both of them. Take time, slow down a little bit, and think about how you felt during each situation. And get real clear in your mind's eye on each situation. This will help you farther to have clarity in what your body is going to do when it's intuitive and what your body's going to do when it's not.
We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. If you liked it, leave a 5-star review on iTunes, and remember, subscribe to our YouTube channel too.
If you can think of anyone else that would love this episode, share it with them right now on social media or email. And remember, getting results is a process of learning, applying, and reflecting. Stay consistent and continue to grow every day.